I would rather be down here. So I am so honored to be here today and to introduce one of my friends, Susan Madsen, to you. We've been friends for, 5 or 6 years now. We served on a board together at the state. And I subscribe. She has a monthly email that I subscribe to, so I'm always interested in her research and what she's doing. But I also wanted you to know that we brought her to campus yesterday and had her do a training with our academic leadership and some of our staff leadership as well. And I share that with you because I want you to know that even this old person is looking for ways to be better at inclusion and belonging and finding ways to help people from all of their various backgrounds succeed. And that's what Dr. Madsen will be talking about with us today. So let me just give you some brief bio. Dr. Madsen is the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the Jon M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And you should probably go, wow, right now. That's a pretty impressive position that she holds at the Jon Huntsman School. She is also the founding director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is sponsoring this and which is shows up there on the screen. And what it does is it focuses on strengthening the impact of Utah girls and women through improving college completion rates and helping girls and women find their voices and become leaders in their various spaces. Professor Madsen and her team have written many Utah research and policy briefs. If anybody is an expert on gender, particularly women in the state of Utah, this is the woman. Nobody knows more about this in the state than she does. She's done research snapshots, impact reports, newspaper editorials, and other resources that she's made available to us. They host 20 to 30 events a year to support the mission of their work. You should also know that she's a well-known global scholar. She's authored or edited or participated in the publication of 8 books and literally hundreds of articles, chapters, and reports. Some of the places that have featured her work, and this is quite an impressive list: U.S. News and World Report, The Atlantic, The New York Times, Parenting Magazine, Chronicle of Higher Education, The Washington Post, and Forbes. And as I read that list, I want you to think about how broad that list is. Those are the places that these kind of issues matter. Anywhere from parenting to business to academics, they're talking about these issues. And finally, you should know that she travels the world speaking and doing workshops and presentations. And she'll probably share a little bit of that with us today. So please welcome Dr. Madsen to the stage.
It's good to be with you, and I'm sure after that bio you're thinking, she's probably so boring because she's writing this and that, and no. I'm going to hopefully keep you engaged, and I'm already loving this because there's reactions. Sometimes when I do college audiences, the faces, you know what I'm talking about, the faces are like, ugh. And I feed off of people that have eye contact and are smiling, so I'm glad the lights aren't too bold so I can see your faces. So I am talking about women's equality in Utah, biases, barriers, and barricades. You like those words? And sometimes people say, they roll their eyes. Sometimes women, more men, and think, oh, not this again. This is critical for us to make sure that our communities, our families, our state, our nation thrive, that everybody has opportunities. And what is your guess in terms of women in opportunities in the state of Utah? We have equality issues, and we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some background. I'm first going to tell you, and I brought some resources for you, so those of you that are interested in just picking up some physical resources, they're out there, and I have a listserv of a newsletter list, and you're welcome to get on that once a month. But I started 13 years ago, the Women in Leadership Project, the Utah Women in Leadership Project. It was supposed to be 1 year, and then I said 2 years, and then it's 13 years, and I'm like, oh my crap, 13 years. Yes, I did say crap already, so I don't swear, but sometimes I say crap and suck. So you'll probably get those 2 words today. So we do 3 main chunks of things. First, we do most of the research on women and girls in the state of Utah, and then we create resources have a podcast, we do infographics, we do videos, we do all of those different kinds of things. We have online curriculum, one on conflict management for women, one that's going to be released in the next month on imposter syndrome for girls and women. And then we convene these trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for the Utah. I also co-lead with a woman named Nubia Pena, who runs the Multicultural Center for the state. We co-lead the efforts for the entire state for Governor Cox, and you know Governor Cox in this area, and his team, the Lieutenant Governor, on equality and opportunity for the full state of Utah. So I'm in those strategic conversations as well. These are some of my books, lots of scholarly books. The two on the right were just published a year ago, and those are specific to women, teenage and young women, college age, in my church, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So they're about how we can prepare to lead. So those are out. So from time to time, I have people say to me, well, to do all this girls and women stuff, you must not like, men. I'm like, actually, I love men. I'm married to one. I have 4 kids. 3 of them are sons. I have 2 grandkids. One of them is a grandson. And then from time to time, I do have people that say, well, to do all this girls and women stuff, you must have been raised with a bunch of sisters. Well, I'm going to show you a picture of my sibling. Yep. I do have 6 brothers, that's it. So if people say, well, why are you doing this girls and women stuff? I will just tell you this, that I feel called to do it. And for women, and I've published actually chapters in non-religious books on women, leadership, and calling. So calling can be religious. For me, it is religious. It comes from God. From other religions, it could be religious. But calling can be for people that are not religious. They just feel like they're meant to do something. And what we know from the research is 30 to 40% more than men, women will lean into leadership, step forward, whatever we want to call, if they feel a purpose, a deep calling. My husband says to me sometimes, do you have to find such deep purpose in everything you do? Can't you just do things for the paycheck? I'm always trying to put my time where I can impact the most. So I have 4 sections I'm going to go through quickly with you. I want to just start, and I won't go through all of these things. This could take a long time. But I want to, why is women's equality and equity so important? I mean, what does it matter? And so there's so much research now in the thousands of articles, thousands. So people that say, well, it might help, it might not. Actually, we know. The research is clear that things change when you have more equal numbers of men and women working together. Just men, you don't get as many benefits. Just women, you don't get as many benefits. It's together that makes the difference. And when you think about leadership roles, do we still have lots of leadership with no women at the table? Absolutely, at all levels. And so we know that that doesn't benefit our communities, our organizations, our colleges and universities as much as, compared to if we had that combination. So very quickly, the first category, tons of studies in the hundreds. There's so many more continuing on this. And most of these studies for this slide are done in corporations. And what they found is when there's more women on the board of directors and in top leadership teams, along with men, that actually the company financially does better. There's all kinds of details here. So that's one thing that's been very clear. Second one, strengthen organizational climate. We know if there's more men and women, and this in general has been shown not just for for-profit companies, nonprofit companies, city councils, all kinds of different groups, that actually when you have more equal numbers, you have decreased turnover catches, higher employee satisfaction, more women hired for the pipeline, increased employee engagement. I love the second one on the right. What I used to teach business ethics a bunch. So what we know, generally, women are typically more ethical than men. We know that. But the interesting study I read a number of years ago said that if women do embezzle, at least they take less money than men. I don't know if that's a real positive thing, but and more, I love this, more considerate team members. It actually changes the interactions when you have men and women working together. The next one is to leverage talent. Do you know that boys and girls are socialized differently from the womb? From the womb, actually, and to little babies. There's studies that say we actually are more likely to hold little baby boys with their face out and little baby girls in the face in. It's really interesting. So we socialize things. In fact, there was a study I was just talking about yesterday of 3-year-old girls and boys and their father's influence. And what they found is this is called benevolent sexism. If there's time, we probably won't. I'll teach you a little bit about that. So these good dads that are so protective of their daughters, guess what happens by the age of 3? Girls are asking for help 3 times more than little boys that are age 3. And we think, is that a problem? You think about it. If we're socialized as girls to ask for help and be more helpless, are you following me? Then we do that all the way up. Do we need strong women? Do we need strong men today? Come on, let me see your heads. No, you're like, no, thank you. Okay, there's someone engaging. Yes, we do. So do we as women ask different questions than men? We do. We have different experiences. Diversity and race, you can put race in that too. We do ask questions. I was speaking to a big group of high school, about 500 high school young women about 5 years ago. I remember this so much. And I said, do you think it's a problem that we don't have many women in our state legislature? And I just watched them, and they were like, no, it probably doesn't make a big deal. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it changes so many things. In fact, the research around states that have more women in their state legislatures, they allocate money differently than states like Utah. So more women typically what do you think the first thing that women typically will make sure there's more money for? Anybody want to guess? Just yell it out. Yep, K through 12. K through 12. So states with more women have more money to K through 12. What do you think number 2 is? I didn't hear that very well, but healthcare is the second one. And then all kinds of things. It's probably in one that you said. But social programs, poverty, homelessness, resources for people who have been sexually assaulted and suffered domestic violence. And do you think sexual assault and domestic violence and child sexual abuse is a problem in the state of Utah? Do you know, and I have a whole bunch of our latest report on sexual assault. Do you know in the state of Utah that we are significantly higher than the national average on sexual assault? 1 in 6 women in the state of Utah experience rape at some time in their life, and 79% before they turn 18. Domestic violence, we're 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence. It's like 1 in 5 for men, so we're not saying men don't experience that either. So those things that sometimes we think are not in our experiences and people next to us in our classes haven't experienced that, we have. They are, those experiences are around us. So we ask different questions. We care about different things, and that's okay. We have to, my husband cares about a lot of other things. He works for Caterpillar, so trucks and roads and civil engineering kinds of stuff, and that's great. But we need the combination to really represent. Isn't government supposed to really represent everything? All of our voices? So it matters. All of these things matter. And then the fourth, really quick, on boards of directors where there's women, and I'll tell you, the research says 30%. When you hit 30% being women, and sometimes there's research that says you have to have 3 women to really start shifting, then things do change. So increased engagement in the community, corporate social responsibility, and so forth. And then the last one, and Harvard Business Review publishes articles almost every other month on new research around this. And it's not guessing, it is clear that when you have more diverse teams, including race and gender, you actually have more creativity, more group innovation, better decision making, higher collective intelligence, greater problem solving, and so forth. So one quick study, I love the term wicked problem. Have you ever heard that? Actually, in the UK, they've been using it. I do work over there. They've been using it for a couple of decades, and they just call it, that's a wicked problem. Like, I love that word. It's just great. Not an unrighteous problem. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about complex. So think about complex problems today that are hard to solve. You just can't make an easy decision. How about the pandemic? How about war? How about racism? Those are wicked problems. You need more minds, more perspectives that are diverse. So this study quickly looked at a military study in the UK, and the researchers put 5 teams, 2/3 of the teams were many teams of just 5 men. And then 1/3 of the teams had 4 men and just 1 woman, which is not even the 30%, right? And then they gave them a wicked problem to solve, and they had cameras, they watched everything. It gave them a super complex issue that they needed to solve, and in every case but one, and the one that did not work is when they were watching the group, the men shut out the women and would not listen to her. In every other case, the teams, even just with 1 woman, outperformed every other team. And I would say it's probably not that the woman was the smartest one in the group. It's just that, the differences make the decisions that come out of those really are more innovative and more creative and better in general. So who benefits when men and women work together in more equal numbers? Individuals, teams, organizations, communities, governments, and societies. The second thing I wanted to bring it to home. So I'm going to tell you where we're at in terms of ranking. So I started paying attention maybe a decade ago, and I do a lot of press. I do TV and radio and all kinds of press a lot, so I get these questions. And Utah does all of these kinds of things. We rank as the Wallet Hub is the one that really puts us out there as the worst state in the whole nation for women's equality. Can I just say, I love being a woman and I love living in Utah. I think Utah's an awesome place. But are there some issues we need to resolve in terms of equality and equity? Of course. But I do stay here because I love this state. But we are ranked as the worst state for women's equality. And Utah's ranked as the second most sexist state. And so those are some things that just because of culture and some different things that we've been ranked. Now you can't see this, but this is the Wallet Hub that ranks us as the worst state for women's equality. Last year, Idaho was only 7 points ahead of us. So I'm like, if we could just get past Idaho, then we can at least not do the worst. But Idaho moved a little quicker this year, so Georgia's not going to do it. So these, I'm not going to go through all these, but you can see where we rank. 40 points out of 100 in workplace environment. The one that really gets us, a couple of them, are the wage gap. And Wyoming was always worse than us on the wage gap, but this year we passed them up, going downhill. So the wage gap is a problem in the state of Utah, very complex though. And then entrepreneurship rate for women. Women, when you compare women to men and companies, we're very low in that. So we rank 44th in the nation for workplace environment. And then the other sections, this is really interesting. This is worth 40 points. These are big differences here between men and women. The first one is we have the broadest gap in the nation in terms of men and women who go to graduate school. That might not surprise some of you, but we do. That's our biggest gap of all of these is graduate school attendance. Now, the second one up here, math scores. I want you to think about this. This is super interesting. So this is 8th grade math scores. This is comparing boys and girls. We're 43rd. There are countries around the world where girls and boys, there's no gap. And there are states where there's no gap. but we're 43rd. What does that mean? That means the boys are scoring much higher than girls in 8th grade on math scores. So is that biological? If other countries don't have a gap, is that biological? No. So what is it? It is socialization. It's how we're brought up. So there's messages that tell girls here more than other states that maybe they shouldn't be good at math, maybe they shouldn't go into careers in math. Do you think those scores guide girls and young women in their choices of college majors? What do you think? I'm looking over here. Do you? Yeah, thank you. I'm seeing some nods. Yeah. So this is really something that we need to look at. And then the whole last chunk really is political empowerment. So when you look at equity or equality in the state of Utah, a big chunk of Wallet Hub is political representation. And as I said before, we are lower. We're not the worst, but we are lower than the national average. And it really does matter. I've had people say to me, isn't it just really important to have really good people in those positions? It doesn't really matter if they're men or women, right? And I'm like, you're right on the first point. It's really important to have really good people in there, and we need more. But absolutely it matters if there's representation of women. The policies are different. There are still subcommittees at our Utah legislature without any women. No women's perspectives, and they relate to family stuff. They relate to things that women's, what we do. I worked part-time until my youngest of 4 kids was out of the house. I know a lot more about the school system. I know a lot more about efforts in the community than my husband ever did. So it makes a difference when those voices are not included. So in education, we are the 50th, and in political, we're 42nd. So we did recommendations, and I'm going to skip through this so I can get to the next one, on exactly, Zions Bank actually commissioned a report last year that says, why do we keep getting as the worst state? And people say, some people say, that's not a big deal if we're low in ranking. Do you think it impacts Utah that other people from other states see us as a place they don't want to be because women aren't going to get paid less, do you think? I mean, it really does impact things. Women's own experiences are more important to me. But so what we did in this report that Zions Bank commissioned is really went down and gave specific recommendations. I won't go through all of those. But I want to shift now into some of the other reasons why, like here, we know the rankings. The first step that I did a little bit ago is why it's important for women to be leaders and more efforts around equality. Second one is our Utah rankings. And now I want to get into some of the challenges. So the biggest challenge I see in the state of Utah and around the world is unconscious bias. And I've spent a decade working on my own unconscious bias, understanding how my brain works and how much of what we do, we really have no clue. We don't understand because most of what we do is unconscious. So understanding that helps us. So we're raised to behave in certain ways. We see women doing this. We see men doing this. We think, well, these are majors in college that women should do. I shouldn't do these. Just those subtle, sometimes, messages that come at us all the time. And by the way, I mean, they're every place. They're how I was raised. So I just retook. Harvard has an implicit bias test. I have taken the one on gender many times, and I've gotten better, but I just retook it last year, and it still told me I had a super lot of bias against women. And I work on this, and I'm like, I've still got a long ways to go myself. So there really is, in most settings, still a real masculine culture that's invisible because that's who has started companies, that's who's been on city councils, but oftentimes people don't see it. And in fact, I didn't see it. I was raised with 6 brothers. I didn't see it for a long time until I did. Until I started listening and learning from women's experiences. And I will tell you this, that there are a lot of women who have suffered a lot because of the inequity in our state and the inequality in our state. And if you will listen and learn as women and men, it can help us. So there's many different barriers, and the time is moving along, so I'm just going to give you the big chunk. I don't think you can see that very well, but there's individual barriers, things like confidence even. We've been socialized in different ways, so confidence levels, the way we communicate sometimes, even a psychological glass ceiling, work-life conflict, those kinds of things. And then there's an organizational and society. In that individual, that imposter syndrome, and if you haven't heard that term, look it up. It's very interesting. It's where those voices tell us we're not good enough, that maybe someone will figure us out and we're not really in the right major or whatever, and just kind of, that's a little bit hard for us as women. So this humility piece is really important. One thing that I found as I've worked with girls and women across the state of Utah is that we have amazing girls and women in our state, and so many women that have no clue how amazing they are. They've been taught not to talk about their gifts and strengths because they need to be humble. But humility is just being teachable. Humility is not being small. And we can be humble and acknowledge our gifts and strengths, be confident and be humble at the same time. And what the research tells us is when we understand our strengths and gifts, we can actually serve and do better for people around us. So it's really important for us to do that. The either-or mentality is really important as well. I'm just looking at my time. I'm moving okay. That means sometimes we're socialized, and men are socialized to see women in this way, that we do all one thing, like we go to college. That's what you're doing. And then if we have a baby, then maybe we just stop college at that point and all do the baby stuff or the home stuff. But we do either or instead of and. So we've done a lot of research in the state that tells us that mothers, like I'm a mother, so then I can't be a leader. I can't do that because I'm a mother. Oh, wait, can we actually be a mom and run for city council? What do you think? You can. It's the and. That and can be super powerful for us. Now, there's organizational barriers that companies are working. So many good companies right now are stepping forward to work on this. Oftentimes, lack of mentoring, sponsorship, support, tokenism, workplace harassment, different things like that. And did you know that one of the challenges is we actually talk different languages sometimes. So success and ambition for women often look different than success and ambition for men. Did you know that? So for men, the research tells us that often that is like in their work. So that career ladder, are you following me? That career ladder, that's more of a success. I think the millennial and the younger generations are changing that a little bit with men. But for women, just focusing on work and that career ladder doesn't make them feel really successful. For women, success is broader. So think about what that might mean. That means, yes, I want to be successful at work, and not but, and I want to be successful as my mother, or as I do my church work, or as I do community work. So women often look at ambition and success as each other differently than men do. So it's important for both women and men to understand that sometimes the language we use might be different. And if we don't understand that, that's limiting for us. Now, you like the word girl up here? I'm going to give you I've written a Forbes piece on the use of girl for women. So I'm going to give you a quick story, and then you'll get it. So right before the pandemic, I was up at the legislative session, and 2 female senators came out to talk to me. and they were laughing awkwardly. So I knew it wasn't a real laugh. And they were just in a room with a whole bunch of men senators. This man had made a statement. He was at the front of the room. 2 male senators on this side wanted to talk, and then the 2 women senators on this side wanted to talk. And the man said, let's have the senators speak first, and then the girls. I'm not seeing any look in your faces. Like, do you get that is an interesting thing? That a lot of times we use the word girl for grown women, and girl is like 12 and younger. So women in general, the research tells us that when those words are used for women themselves, they feel smaller, and other people feel like they're less than when we use some of those words. And a lot of times we use those words. So boys goes with girls, guys goes with what? Gals, thank you. Ladies, gentlemen, man, women. But it's interesting, the research behind. We use the word girl a lot. And then there's just societal things. We've talked a little bit about that already. So in general, I want to tell you something. So the Utah culture, and you know my religion. I've told you my religion, and I love being here in Utah. But do we have some challenges? And sometimes it's in the past decades. We've seen that in other states as well. But in Utah, I want to give you a study that's really eye-opening and been interesting to me. You remember when I talked about the wage gap a little bit ago? And by the way, before I go there, I want to tell you something. Sometimes when we get into this discussion of women's equality, there's this either-or going on. And what it is the scarcity mentality. So we say, well, if I as a man am going to support women, then it's going to take from me. It's going to take me down. So I got to fight to not support women. Or at me, as a woman, if I'm going to lift and support my sisters of color, then somehow it takes from me. So that's the scarcity mentality. And we have that pretty strong in the state. Now, the abundance mentality is, oh my gosh, we can lift and help other people and be lifted ourselves. We can actually do that. Like that's where we can really make a difference here in society. Now, just real quick, a quick study on the wage gap. So there was a study that looked at religious cultures and the wage gap. They studied every single state and compared them to each other. They did a second study where they compared all the countries to each other and looked at which states or countries were most religious and compared them to countries that were not. And in every state and nation, it didn't matter what religion, more religious societies had more wage gap. And they studied 3 reasons. 1, fertility rate. 2, more religious societies have less women in political power. And 3, more religious societies actually have more sexual objectification, measured by pornography rates, cosmetic surgery rates, all kinds of things. And more religious societies tend to have higher levels of domestic violence, sexual assault, and child sexual abuse. And sometimes people think it should be the opposite. I think it should be the opposite. But somehow there's some interesting dynamics there that when you have societies where men have much more recognition and power than women, the power dynamic lead to inequity and inequality in terms of violence against women, even those. So I say, I love my religion, I love being in Utah, but if we don't raise our own awareness and the awareness of people around us, we cannot change. And do we need to change? After the statistics I've given you, do we need some change in Utah? We all need to change. I need to change. People around us need to change. The rates of the violence need to absolutely change so that we can build societies in our state where in more equal, and equitable numbers, that everyone in our state can be lifted and thrive. And I get emails every day from people that are suffering, people that want to do more and be more and are shut down. And I will tell you, I appreciate you. I know you men have to be here if you're in this class, but men, if they're moving along in this journey, along with women, can be such powerful allies. In fact, white men can be the best powerful allies, not just for women, but people of color, and that combination of women and people of color. You know, as we learn, and I'm trying to learn how to be an ally to my sisters of color, and I'm moving, I'm getting better, got a long ways to go. So let me look at the time, don't have much time, but there's two kinds of sexism that really are at the root, and it's hostile sexism, which is still out there, but benevolent sexism. And that's sexism where we're taught to help. Men are specifically taught to really help and protect women, right? And so even with a quick example, a boss who is a male may really appreciate a female that works for him and says, well, I'm going to go to this event tonight with the governor and with CEOs and these important people, and she would be great going to that event. But she's got 3 little kids, and she's worked so hard. I don't want her to feel like she has to do something else, so she doesn't even get the invitation. That's an example, one of many, about benevolent sexism, where protecting, want to be nice, it comes from a good place, but guess what she doesn't get then? She doesn't get training, she doesn't get networking, she doesn't get to meet people that could help her career, that could help even if she's not in the workplace. Maybe she's helping with a cause in society. And then she doesn't even get to go. So sometimes and women can do that to each other, I'll tell you. So that's just one quick example. And then in the packets, and I put a few things outside, we did a huge study on sexist comments and responses, and men are loving this study, and women are too. And I've got some examples outside of just comments and really being able to have some good conversations on how they really disadvantage women in certain areas. Some of them are really clear. Some of them are a little more subtle. But I have that research, and I have some little brochures out there if you're interested in getting getting on the website. So we do have opportunities. This work is all about change. It's changing us. It's changing our classrooms. It's changing our societies and communities. And I will tell you this. This is what I love, and this is what I've gotten better at, is instead of being defensive, when someone says, well, you know, in racism, I've been working on racism in myself, instead of being defensive, to change it and say, oh, I'm curious. Why did I feel that when there was a talk about racism? Why am I shutting that down? Instead of like, ooh, I want to be better. I want to be better. I want to do better. I want to help people better. The more that we look at equality and equity and not shy away from it and find joy in change, the better we can become. We really are better together. And I will tell you, if you want to be comfortable, you shouldn't be in college. I'm just going to say that. Because college is learning. If you want to be comfortable, then don't engage in anything I'm talking about. Because we're supposed to be out of our comfort zone. That's what we're supposed to do, to grow and learn and be better and be more helpful to people around us. And let's shift into that growth mindset. Anything I'm talking about, if you're feeling some like, ooh, don't like this conversation, that's a fixed mindset mentality. And I've been there sometimes, and I have to say, whoa. Nope, that's fixed mindset. Come over to growth mindset. How do I do that? Good books. Carol Dweck's mindset book is awesome. And understand your strengths, like I said a minute ago. That's so important as well. And I mentioned already how important this co-conversation to really help and lift other people. We need to be in an abundance. You know, if she gets an award and I don't, if I'm feeling like, oh, that's not fair, first of all, I'm in the fixed mindset. and I'm in the scarcity mentality. Those are key things. So how do we shift that and get over into the growth mindset and the abundance mentality? And we can lead. Everything I've talked about can be in our homes, in our schools, in our communities, in our churches, society, workplaces, government, all of these things. And learning how to lead. We have so many places that we really do need better leaders. Some final thoughts, too. I do love this one. Silence becomes cowardice when occasion demands speaking out and acting accordingly. And there really are tools out there. We have on my website, and we have a lot of tools, lots of things, so we can get more confidence in leaning in, moving forward, speaking out, and really lifting each other. I'm going to end with this. I love this. I just said it yesterday in a presentation too, but for some reason when I was thinking about coming down to Snell College, this kind of connected with me, and hopefully it will connect with you. So I love this. This was 2000 in Arizona by the Hopi Nation elders. There is a river flowing now very fast. It is so great and swift that there are those who will be afraid, who will try to hold on to the shore. They are being torn apart and will suffer greatly. Know that the river has its destination. The elders say we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of the river, and keep our heads above water. And I say, see who is there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment we do, our spiritual growth and journey come to a halt. The time of the lone wolf is over. Gather yourselves. Banish the word struggle from your attitude and vocabulary. All that we do now must be done in a sacred manner and in celebration, for we are the ones we've been waiting for. I'll tell you, through the years, I've just heard people say, well, somebody should do something about this. We should get somebody better in public office. We should get more women in engineering, or whatever it might be. We need more people. You should do that. Guess what? It's us. And you're much younger than me, so it's you more than me. We need to, every girl and boy and every man and woman need to be prepared to lead and lean in and lift and help other people. And I think by looking at this topic of the barriers and the biases and the barricades for women's equality, that just helps all of us know more about what we can do to help ourselves, to help our families, to help our communities, and to help each other. I love this last quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. And I just challenge you to be those people that decide to lean in, step forward, and do more to really help with equality in this state of Utah. Thank you so much.